All right, so this is the panel, our headhunter panel. Now, our conference people very shrewdly schedule this at the very end so that people stick around to get some free advice from guys who are otherwise charging thousands and thousands of dollars. So 4 years ago, senior executives, CEOs in particular, could do no wrong. They filled up the gossip columns and the party appearances. They were fabulously wealthy. They were swashbucklers. They were heroes of capitalism. Then came the bubble burst, and suddenly CEOs can do no right. Today, they're targets in the line of fire. We pass entire laws aimed at forcing the CEO personally to sign off on financials where he says, to the best of my knowledge, the numbers are right. It's like we don't trust him anymore. And we're just constantly waiting for you guys to do the slightest things that might screw up. So what are the tools the CEO needs for survival? And what can we learn from the political system as well? If you look at what Bush might have done if he were a CEO before Iraq and what he might have done after is another area we could get into. So with us today to discuss this is a quite impressive panel, Tom Stern. Now, Stern runs Stern Executive Search, which does searches for higher level and mid-level people, not necessarily CEO. But he also is the author of CEO Dad, comic strip, which you've seen in our program here, and which is occasionally funny. And that was a joke. And apparently that wasn't that funny. And the thing that Tom really likes to focus on is work-life balance. And how can that be an asset and a skill set that executives need to keep in mind?
Well, I think they've said a lot. I think another issue is the work-family life balance issue. I do think there is so much pressure. There is a kind of strategy or a vision that happens maybe even above the CEO that churns them, and that they're so driven to meet these results and to handle all these pressures and the scrutinization that goes on, and they don't have enough balance in their life with their families because of the logistical issues and the traveling and everything else, that it's easier to burn out. And I just think that there is less attention placed on the human being, the CEO as human being, not just as leader and as symbol and as front man for the organization.
The CEO as human being. Now that's actually a pretty good thought. Are any of you gentlemen aware of any studies that show that a CEO with good balance in his work and family life, that company fares better in terms of shareholder returns than one who's a total Lou Gerstner workaholic, run, travel 1 million miles a year? Any studies that show it?
Yeah, well, that's one of the problems. More people are starting to write about it, and I think it's being explored. But really, it's a greenfield, and the data isn't there. I do think, though, that a lot of these thoughts that I'm saying will grow into the promise of their logic. And it just is a certain logic about human beings and common sense that I'm trying to apply. And of course, I'm not alone. That is a part of what is the work-life balance integration movement. I think that we need those studies, and I think we need to gather that information so we can make proper assessments. But common sense would dictate that some humanity that is injected in terms of the lifestyle of the individual is positive for this reason alone. I think that when you don't have a balanced life and you don't have the connection with your family because of work, there is pain. There's pain in the individuals that are waiting for you at home. There's pain when they are tough on you because of their own frustration and deprivation. And where there is pain, there is generally less efficiency. Just talk to athletes, talk to anybody in a profession. So that's the logic that I think supports the movement.
Another good thing is that when something goes wrong, you can blame your team, okay, and hold on to your job.
Well, also, one thing that I did neglect to mention when you asked me if there's any data, there isn't directly necessarily on, work-life, family integration and all that, but Jim Collins's book, Good to Great, did assess companies that had tremendous growth over a period of time, and he determined that the CEOs that he felt were the most effective were not fitting that swashbuckling image that you were talking about. They were humble men, they cared about their people, they had a certain sense of loyalty, they were very down to earth. So that was accumulated data that one could extrapolate to some of the other issues I was talking about.
Right. So let's talk about change inside the company. You're the CEO, you get in place, you see this place is screwed up.
And to the teams around.
Right.
I don't think there's any real, absolute formula. That's not to in any way undercut what you do, because you have a methodology, and certainly methodologies are necessary in terms of penetrating defenses and enhancing capability of any executive. I do think part of it is not just getting feedback, which is important, but also just doing your own gut check about yourself. One of the most talented executives I ever knew was a guy who passed away recently named David Schneider. He ran all of e-commerce for PricewaterhouseCoopers and then Nextera for Michael Milken. And his ability, his talent, was that he was an intellectual and he challenged everyone intellectually. He was really brutal with them. Well, why? Well, why? Well, why? And he would argue with them constantly, but he counterbalanced it with an incredible ability to have fun with them. So he created a collegiality, almost like, you know, a rugby team or a football team or something like that. And he knew that that was his strength, that he could work them that hard and then play that hard with them. And he intuitively understood that by counterbalancing those two aspects of his personality, he was effective, and he built incredible loyalty and retention.
You know,
You're getting paid to run the company. They're paying you for your judgment. If in your heart you say this ain't going to work, pull the plug.
Don't waste your time.
Oh, well, you're going to be very, very frustrated with me, and you'll probably become my enemy. But I have to say that I agree, actually, with what they're saying. Michael made a very good point, which is, you know, external enemies you can't control because, and I don't know if you echoed it in this way, but because you can take an internal enemy and make them an external enemy. You can't do the opposite. So that's one point. Secondly, I do think there has to be a continuum of evaluating individuals who are opposed to you, and that's what Marshall's talking about. Because if you turn people who disagree with you or people who you have conflict with and you perceive them as enemies, then you escalate that conflict unnecessarily. I mean, who knows where Eisner and Disney started out? We know where they ended up. But maybe they started out in a smaller place that wasn't quite as there wasn't quite as much stratification or cognitive dissonance or whatever the heck was their problem. And if there had been an intervention at that time, it might not have escalated. We know that they ended up as real enemies. So sometimes there are people where initially there is a gut check and you've got to get rid of them, and sometimes you create enemies by perceiving them that way and escalating the conflict.
So what is the very first thing a high-ranking, powerful executive should do? I want to leave. What is the first thing they should do? All three of you.
Well, Bob Pittman took about a year off. I mean, that was what he did, to be with his family. And he said, I'm going to regird myself. I'm going to, you know, look and develop a fresh point of view. And that was the way he kind of dealt with the storm that was around him and all the controversy was at AOL, et cetera. And that was his approach. So for him, that worked. I don't know what it is for Iger. I mean, some people could, you know, jump right into another position if they really feel it's right for them. Again, I'm equivocating, but I just don't know if there's one answer.